Our doctors are there to write us prescriptions. That's what we go to our doctors for, to fix our problem.
You cannot just show up to your 15-minute appointment and say, Doc, I feel like crap. It became personal when they were like, yeah, we're going to put you on some meds for cholesterol. I was like, nope, you're not putting me on that. Nor did I want them to say, oh, you can't sleep. Let me give you some sleeping pills. That's not solving the problem. That was just band-aiding it for me.
Why aren't they referring us to an endocrinologist? Isn't it kind of frustrating?
How long do I have to deal with this?
Is that a better route for women to go?
I made a decision to really focus on me and getting all of these things done in parallel. I got sleep taken care of. I got my mood taken care of. I feel so much better.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Menopause Mindshift Self-Love Podcast, where we are having real, honest conversations for women who are ready to write their own menopause story. I am your host, the Menopause Queen, Lisa R. Triggs, and I am a menopause motivational speaker as well as best-selling author. And today I have a very special guest with me. So I would like to have you help me welcome LaVaughn Seepersad-Fayson. What happens when your body starts changing? No one explains why, and you are left to figure it out on your own. My guest today, LaVaughn Seepersad-Fayson, knows what it feels like to move through menopause, feeling confused, unheard, and searching for answers. That experience became the catalyst for her second act, where she now supports women understanding what is happening in their bodies and reclaiming clarity, comfort, and confidence in their menopause journey. LaVaughn, welcome to the Menopause Mindshift Self-Love Podcast. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here with the Menopause Queen.
Oh, thank you. In reading your information and in speaking with you, your journey was very similar to mine. It sounds like things were happening in my body and I didn't know it was related. 47 was the age I hit full menopause. So tell me about your journey though. Like what was going on? What symptoms were you having that you had no idea were related to menopause?
Oh, I had so many. I would say that for me, so I think I started perimenopause in my early 40s. And of course, looking back with the knowledge that I have now I know those symptoms. And one of the first one was the weight gain around the midsection that drove me absolutely bonkers, because if it was one thing I loved about me is that I had that tiny waist. And then overnight, it was gone. And I had not done anything different with my diet or exercise. I was also having bouts of extreme mood swings. And when I say extreme, I mean like I could be having this conversation with you right now, and then something went off in my brain and I would be angry. And then I would be flushed and angry. And then 5 minutes later, I'd be like, hey, Lisa, what's up? As if I had not just yelled at you, for example. And I had teenage daughters at the time in high school. And so I was like, okay, it's just them. It's the stress of being a mom to teenage girls that's making me like feel crazy. And then as it progressed, I had the bout of the hot flashes and night sweats, but they came on in the summer. And then the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak, was my labs. I always had awesome blood pressure and cholesterol numbers. And for 3 straight years, my LDL, that lousy cholesterol, started to creep up. And when I went in to see my OBGYN, she said to me, if these numbers go up again, we're going to have to talk about medication. And I was like, nope, we're not doing that. Nope. And that's when I started really thinking this has got to all be related to something, but I couldn't put my finger on what that something was.
When you were there with the lab, I mean, they never said, oh, by the way, you're in perimenopause or.
Nope. That's the thing.
And the funny thing is, if we don't think to ask, hey, can you check that? They don't.
They don't. And on top of that, all of my doctors were women and we were all around the same age, right? And every year I would go in for my physical and be like, I don't know why I'm gaining weight. Why is my middle getting bigger? And I don't know why I'm like being so snappy with my kids and like all of the things. And no one ever said, you know what? Have you ever heard about perimenopause? That was never mentioned. I was feeling normal. Everything else was just run of the mill. And I think, everybody starts to think, well, we're getting older. So yeah, your metabolism is slowing down. That's why you're gaining weight. Oh, it's just the kids. That's why you're feeling that way, right? And nobody really made that connection. For me, it became personal when they were like, yeah, we're going to put you on some meds for cholesterol. I was like, nope, you're not putting me on meds. No way, Jose. So, and in the midst of all of that, I was also having very annoying periods. And to me, it became even more annoying because I said to myself, I'm not having any more kids. I'm 40 plus. By this time, I'm like 44 now, right? And I knew that. And I'm just go, why am I having this period? Like, how long do I have to deal with this? And so that was a conversation that I had with my provider. And I said, I cannot deal with these periods. They were very heavy and I had a lot of cramps. And then on top of that, we had all the other things I just talked about. And I said, you know what? I really want to fix that. And then she said, well, there's a surgery for that. We can do an ablation surgery. And essentially, we're just going to thin that lining so much that number one, you will not bleed anymore. And then, you don't have to worry about that. And I was like, yes, sign me up. That was the one thing that I didn't have to think twice about. So I got that. But then what happened? I no longer had that period, right? So now I don't have that thing that people begin to watch for that has the ending at menopause. I couldn't count the 365 days without a real period because I had stopped that. So again, we didn't have a conversation about perimenopause or anything like that. So all of these things are still happening. And now I'm going to the doctor. I'm 47 and a half. And they always say, when was your last period? And I would say, I no longer have a period. To me, a provider would say, oh, are you postmenopausal? Never asked. Never. So here I am. I'm like, I don't even know. And perimenopause is still not a word in my vocabulary. And I'm trying to, deal with all of the symptoms. It wasn't until my early 50s when I really started to do the research that I realized, wait a second, all of these things are adding up. And I probably hit menopause when I was 47 when I had that ablation surgery.
Isn't it kind of frustrating that sometimes when you don't know or you don't think, we rely on our providers, provide that information, maybe ask us the questions, and they don't when something doesn't come to top of mind, because the same thing happened to me. So one of my things now, like you, is to advocate for yourself. There's never, there's not never too young to, because I've heard of women in their even early-ish 30s who are starting to have issues. And there's all kinds of reasons why, whether it's socioeconomic. Isn't it just so frustrating?
It was very frustrating. And on top of that, here's another piece that I realized when I was even telling you the story is that they did ask you a question about how you're feeling. Because there's this survey that they do, and at least I know here in the US, where they want to know if you're psychologically well, if they want to understand your state of depression. So when you go in, they ask you, like, how are you feeling? Like, how many times this week did you feel like you wanted to harm yourself? Like how many times did you cry? And I knew that they were asking that question around trying to figure out if I was depressed and if they needed to talk to me about depression. But I also knew that I felt like crying a lot during this journey, but I didn't consider myself depressed. I was crying. I wanted to cry because of all of the other things that had been adding up and making me feel so uncomfortable in my own skin. And I wondered had I reported that, if that would have made a difference in the conversation, or would they have been like, oh my gosh, you might be depressed. Let me give you some medication to deal with your depression, which is what I did not want. And that I didn't want. I did not want that, nor did I want them to say, oh, you can't sleep. Let me give you some sleeping pills. Because to me, that's not solving the problem. That was just band-aiding it for me. And I didn't want that. I wanted somebody to tell me, like, this might be something that we need to work on. And that didn't come.
Here's something that I've come to realize in that with the medical community, it's just that. Our doctors are there to write us prescriptions. That's what we go to our doctors for. We go to our doctors, our MD, to give us a prescription or tell us what's wrong. That's really what we go for, to fix our problem. Now, there's other resources, sometimes like naturopaths, right? So is that a better route for women to go, or I've had this conversation with my husband actually just recently. I'm like, okay, because your main MD, we get referred to an OBGYN to deal with the menopause. But I'm like, why aren't they referring us to an endocrinologist? That's a hormone doctor, a doctor that specializes is in hormones. Now, still the same thing is you go to an endocrinologist, they're going to do the same thing because they are a doctor. You're going to go to them and they're going to you're there to get a prescription for your hormone replacement therapy or whatever, right? They're a doctor of hormones. So they're not going to say, we'll try eating these foods or taking these supplements. You need to go the naturopathic route for that. So I think we have to be clear on which way we want to go and which support we want, because this is something that really occurred to me. Yeah, in the Canada and the United States and all around the world, women are talking about the lack of support in the medical community. That's what we go there for, is to get our prescriptions, right? So it's the other care, and we just have to figure out what it is that we need. But let's go back and continue on your journey, because I veered off for a second there. But I think it's important to remember that, though. It's important, I think, to bring that to light, that we got to remember what they're there for, right?
We do. And we also have a responsibility to advocate for ourselves, which I totally believe in. And I wish that I was able to do more of that in my 40s. Because at the end of the day, you cannot just show up to your 15-minute appointment, by the way, at least that's how much we get here in the US, and say, Doc, I feel like crap. Okay, what does that mean? What does feeling like crap mean to you? So you need to show up with receipts. You need to say, for example, I haven't been able to sleep for 2 months. I also have joint pain. I also have migraines. And I've realized that these things get worse when I do XYZ, when I work out too much, when I have excessive alcohol, when I am overly stressed. So now you're coming in there and you're putting the story together for your doctor, which helps him or her come up with a solution that's more geared towards you. But if you just say, I feel like crap and I can't sleep, then they're going to be like, all right, we got 13 minutes left in this appointment. I heard feel like crap and can't sleep. I'm going to prescribe you what? A sleep aid, because I want you to go to sleep and then come back in 3 months. Can you get an appointment in 3 months? Probably not. If you don't have insurance, can you afford to come back in 3 months? Probably not. So it just builds and builds and builds. And we have that responsibility on ourselves to educate our healthcare practitioners about us so that they can help us. And also say, I don't want to do medication. I don't want a drug as my first line of defense, which is what I said when she talked about, hey, I'm going to put you on meds for this cholesterol. I said, nope, we're not doing that. We got to think of something else.
So what did she say? Okay, well, you got to adjust your diet and exercise more, probably, or something like that, right?
So the funniest thing is, and this is haha funny, but not really, is back then the whole office. So it was an office of women. It was a practice for women by women. They were on this liquid diet called Prolon. It was big. And it was a very expensive liquid diet, and they were all on it to lose weight. And that's what she said to me. Oh my gosh, you should try Prolon. And I said, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing the liquid diet. No, I don't want to do that. She says, well, you should lose a few lbs. Okay, great. But I'm not going to use that solution that you have provided. But I was like, that's not the solution for me. And nor did she say, okay, well, I'm going to refer you to a nutritionist. She was just like, okay, well, you really do need to lose some pounds. I'm like, okay. So I did do some advocating now that I think about it, but I needed some more data about myself when I went in there. And perhaps it would have been better.
Now, after this experience with you, you end up retiring from your day job, right? And taking some courses so that you can now help women as well be able to advocate and educate for themselves. Walk me through how this came about. What um, inspired you, or and said, I have to do something about this and make a difference in other women's lives.
My career was in the federal government in the United States. And the majority of the work that I did centered around helping underserved communities and small businesses. That's always the work that I always enjoyed the best. And towards the end of my career, that type of work was not seen in a very good light. So last year in 2025, I had to make a very difficult decision to either leave the federal government or stay and potentially be fired.
Now that you say federal government, yeah, because Trump eliminated a lot of jobs, right? So were you going to get eliminated anyway, so to speak? So smart on you for saying, I'm going to retire before you got eliminated.
Correct. So I was part of the groups of people that did the type of work that the new administration did not see as valuable. So we were a part of a list that were on the chopping block anyway. And so I had to make that decision. Either I waited out and potentially be fired or laid off, which means I would have lost a lot, or I chose to take the early retirement, which gave me a little bit more security for my family. So I did that. But I always knew in my heart of hearts that I wasn't just going to sit at home. I mean, I'm young. I was 53 at the time. There was no way I was just going to retire. And I always knew that if in my second act, I was always going to do something that helped women, children, or dogs. I was thinking, I said, you know what? You always when you start a new business, right? You should do it because you're solving a problem, right? So that, you can make some money. And so I thought back, I was like, you know what? That perimenopause, man, that threw me for a loop. And people had just started to talk about it again, but not really giving it the words that we have for it now. And I said, you know what? That's what I could do because I love data. That's the geeky part of my company. I love to read data. I love to interpret data. And I'm really good at reading and interpreting data and then relaying it to the masses. And I was like, yeah, I can read those medical journals. I can do all of that and I can spit it right back out. And so I was like, this is what I'm going to do. So I got my certification in menopause coaching and I also did an intensive class on hormones. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I'm learning for myself, but I'm like, wait a second. Women need to know this. And I need to tell them. I need to tell them all. But I can't tell it to them in this like doctor geeky way only. I need to make it accessible and fun so they actually want to talk to me. I got to be cheeky about it. And so Cheeky Geeky was born. I mean, I have a course and I have coaching and I just finished a journal. It's a guided journal which teaches women how to craft your own menopause journey strategy, step by step by step. That's as far as I've gone in my writing, but it's not a book. It's a guided journal.
You have a definitely a relatable story, you know? And like I was saying before, this could go into a whole other conversation now that we kind of opened up Pandora's box about what kind of support and care women actually need. Even Dr. Mary Claire Haver, right, has outed the medical community, so to speak, and say, you know what, we didn't actually learn anything about menopause in medical school. Like that was the basic. Really stop and think about it. What else is there? Like, what else can they do? Like other than develop some more drugs kind of thing. So we have to decide what we want. advocating, educating, and for myself and anyway, that, I ended up discovering the natural way, or using my mindset, using all these other tools that I discovered available to me to make my own changes through my own stuff by lowering my stress and improving my own mood and making my own choices and things like that. So, what route did you end up going? So, have you gone through this naturally?
So before I tell you my route, I do have to say that I 100% believe that every woman has the right to make a choice about which way she wants to go. We have to say that. If you want to go 100% medical and drugs, if you want to do a hybrid, or if you want to take the natural homeopathic, because at the end of the day, it's what is going to work for you. So what I decided to do was I took a hard look at myself, because I knew there were things that I was doing that I should stop doing. We cannot live in our late 40s and 50s like we did in our 30s. And we need to realize that. That's number one. And number two, you have to be really honest with your lifestyle and what you can give up and what you can keep. Because we can no longer continue to eat ultra processed foods, not getting enough sleep, working out until we're sore for days. Like, all of those things, our body can no longer handle as we age. So you have to understand that. And you have to recognize that. You also have to recognize that your mind plays a big part in how you process stress and what your environment does to your body. So if you know that you're in a stressful environment, you need to try your very best to alleviate that, because that's going to weigh on you. Even though you don't see it, it enters into your brain, right? So I had to change up a couple of things. And then I made, and this is what I, teach in my coaching. I made a list of the things that were causing me the most angst in my life and what I had to change. And the first thing I realized was that I need to have a good night's sleep. Period. At end of discussion. And so by me fixing my main problem, all of my other ones slowly started to diminish. And I've also had to make changes in how I work out, how I lift weights, how I deal with my stress, because I know what it does to my body. So I have had to make conscious changes about how I want to change in order to live the life that I live. Now, there's still things that I'm working on, right? But in the terms of the lists and the priorities, I got sleep taken care of, I got my mood taken care of. So I feel so much better. So I see it as a way for me to get over the hump of the discomfort that I had been having. But I am working at all of the other things every day.
Thank you for being so honest and sharing this, and sharing that that's the route that you chose to go to, and it's working for you. It's been able to give you that clarity, and I totally agree on the sleep. Sleep has been one of the most important things, that has benefited me. I've been talking last few months about sleep meditations and things like that, just to help lower that stress for those people who are doing things naturally.
You already know in the back of your mind, if you do a dinner where you have the alcohol or the wine, the sugar and the salt together, that combo, something might happen to you later, whether that's unrefreshing sleep, that's the hot flashes, your gut might start to do some dances. Those are your triggers, right? And know them and write them down, right? So if I want to feel better, these are things that I might try to give up for a week and see what happens before you go on medication. You can fix, right, some of these things on your own, just by being honest and listening to your body.
One thing that came to mind, I know is kind of closing off, but one thing came to mind just as you were saying this, and because you were working on these other things as well, your diet, exercise, and your mindset. I guess I got to ask it. Did you not see an improvement in your sleep by doing all these other things?
The improvement in my sleep and me actively working on these other things have all been happening at the same time, at the same full speed. Like, I made a decision to really focus on me and getting all of these things done in parallel. And there's still things I struggle with. But all in all, I can say If if I were to rate how am I feeling on a scale of 1 to 10, it's a solid 8. So the other issues that I had were joint pain, the weight issues, and the mood swings also, they went down when I was getting better sleep. So the main things for me was the weight gain and the joint pain. I had really terrible joint pain and the not being able to sleep. So when I put all three of those together, I said, listen, I need to get this sleep under control. And so that's where I started first. And now I'm working on all of the other things because a good night's sleep allows me the opportunity to work out in a meaningful way, get my walks in, and still be able to function. And so that has always been the thing that has given me the greatest amount of energy and making me feel more like myself. But I also know that I'm not going to go on Ozempic or any of those other things for weight loss. I rather work on that holistically for me with diet and exercise.
How can everybody reach you, and what is it that you provide everybody now?
So, my main thing is education, right? I really, really want women to have the education in an upfront, unbiased way. I'm going to tell you like it is. I am not on one side or the other. I'm going to tell you what the data says. I'm going to explain everything to you. So I provide education. I have an online course that walks you through the education piece and developing your own strategy. It's a 16 module course. So it's lengthy, but it walks you through the very, very beginning. And the very beginning is, where am I in this journey? Am I premenopause, perimenopause, or postmenopause? Because your strategy is going to look different. You can find me on Instagram and you can find me on LinkedIn. I only have 2 social media platforms.
So this has been a really, really enlightening and deep in some ways conversation. Thank you so much for joining me today. The moral of today's story is to figure out, advocate for yourself and figure out what's best for you, or the direction that you were going, or the place you were at. It depends what you're doing though. When we say mindset work, like when we're meditating and things like that, these are all things that help us to be able to reduce that stress, and then will help us sleep better. Thank you so much for joining me. And for anybody watching and listening, as always, please have a beautiful day. And remember, put yourself first so that it's self love first. Bye for now.